For me, it was seeing William at the most relaxed we've seen him all year. He talked about his love for the continent of Africa. He said it was where he went to seek comfort as a teenager. It was where he proposed to his wife. It's also where the idea for the Earthshot Prize was born, because he was inspired by some of the projects he saw in Namibia and Tanzania back in 2018. And we've seen him so relaxed, and also, you know, this is what they describe as his Superbowl moment, isn't it? The Earthshot Prize Awards. And there he was, literally wearing shoes made by one of the Earthshot Prize winners.
Who apparently didn't know he was going to beforehand.
Biodegradable shoes and a Prince of Wales check blazer, which was bought from a vintage shop. Everybody there on the green carpet told to wear sustainable clothing. And I think we saw him, you know, he was talking about the children, he was talking about Catherine. He seemed to be much more at peace.
After a very difficult year.
After extremely
he's gone away to this
year.
project, which has again been a very successful one, and you know, he felt able to talk about Kate in the way in which he hasn't before.
Well,
so.
I was going to touch on that as well, because of course we have seen so much of William in the last few weeks with the homelessness documentary, and then of course all the activities around Earthshot Prize. And it has been such a difficult year. When Catherine had to retreat from public duties, he also had to take a break, and has obviously had to figure it out as he went along, as the family worked with her health. So does it feel like we're seeing a bit of a new era of William? He does seem relaxed and a bit more self-assured and ready.
Well, I think it started with that video that was released in September to mark the end of Kate's chemotherapy, and we really saw a much more intimate portrait of them as a couple and as a family, and he was happy for that to be out there. And then asked about the Princess of Wales, and he said, you know, she's doing really well and she's been amazing this whole year, and, you know, I know she's going to be cheering me on. Much more willing to speak than I think we've heard him. Much less guarded than perhaps we might have expected.
Absolutely the most we've heard in those.
And you never know when you ask that question whether one of their team is going to pull you away, or whether he's just going to sort of freeze up and say, wasn't expecting your question on Kate. But, I mean, look, if you were going to advise William, you're going to tell him someone's going to ask you a question about how Kate is, at least prepare an answer. And at least he was prepared to take it and share something, which is what people kind of want to hear. They just want to hear that she's OK and that she's doing all right. And, of course, we might see her a little bit more over the coming weeks. We've got Remembrance coming up, which she really wants to make. We've got the Christmas Carol concert that gets recorded sort of quite early in December at Westminster Abbey. So we might see a bit more of her.
Bit happier times for the Welleses, and it's good to see them out and about, you know, and... onto some more unfortunate health news for the royal family, although not as serious. But Queen Camilla's had to cancel some engagements with a chest infection this week. It does appear that she's on the mend, because she is booked in for something next week as well. But even though she'll be out of action in person, she does have her documentary on domestic abuse coming out next week. Now, I believe you've seen it, Sarah, and you had a preview. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yes, this is documentary, a 90-minute film, Her Majesty Queen Camilla Behind Closed Doors, and it has followed her for a year, focusing on her work with domestic violence and domestic abuse, and trying to raise awareness of that and to give survivors a voice. And it's an incredibly powerful, hard-hitting watch. We see her never-before-seen footage of her going into a refuge, meeting survivors of domestic abuse. And she talks, you can hear the passion in her voice about why this is so important to her. It's something she's been doing for more than a decade. But she has a remarkable platform to be able to raise awareness. And watching it, I mean, we watched it at a special screening at Buckingham Palace. You could have heard a pin drop, and there were gasps, audible gasps of breath as some of the statistics came up. There's a call to the police every 30 seconds about domestic abuse, and that's those that manage to make the call. And that's seen as being only a quarter of potential cases. And it was only in 1991 that rape became a crime within marriage. Until then, it was just seen as a wife's duty. I mean, I was horrified. That's not very long ago.
I can tell it's had a big impact on you.
Yeah.
So this is the kind of thing I think it will then...
I think if you watch it, it really does make you stop and think just how widespread and prevalent this is.
So the figures that jumped out at me, in fact, I got a centre preview and watched it last night at home, and the figures that jump out at you are that 3 women take their own lives every week. Every week. because of domestic violence, and 30 women contemplated every week as well. And, you know, I've been to a refuge with Camilla before, and she does this work a lot. And even when we go on foreign trips, I mean, it doesn't always get a lot of coverage because there's so much else going on.
Yeah.
But in Australia and in Samoa recently, she went to, the charities that help women who are trying to flee abusive relationships. And I agree, I thought it was really moving, really powerful. It shows Camilla in a completely different light, but also that I think she's got not just a professional connection as like, I'm the Queen and I'm the head of this, I'm the patron of this charity, a real kind of personal connection with the women and the survivors, and you could see that.
You can see the tears in her eyes at multiple points, actually, as she's speaking to survivors, families who've lost someone to domestic abuse. But she also talks about discussing it with her grandchildren, her granddaughters in particular, and getting the teenage girl's perspective on it. I mean, it's something she really does take home and live and breathe.
Is it fair to say, from hearing what you're both saying about the documentary, and also we discussed on the show last week the fact that Prince William's homelessness documentary showed a side of him that we had never seen before. Is it fair to say that we're seeing a different side of Camilla through this documentary?
I think so. Well, it's a side that we kind of see on the road with her quite often. But not everything makes it into the newspapers. Not everything makes it onto the TV or on social media. So I kind of think it shows a real side of Camilla that perhaps many members of the public haven't seen before. And actually, one of the reasons this started, and she had an interest for a decade or more, but she met the mother, Diana Parks, whose daughter had been killed by her husband. And the very first meeting she went to, she heard the whole story about what happened and just how dreadful it was. And she was openly crying in that room. Yeah. She says in the documentary, even the policemen and the journalists in the room were crying as well. And you could see how she was so moved by that. I think that was the moment she thought, I've got this platform and I'm going to do something about it. And I thought, interestingly, they had the former Prime Minister Theresa May in the programme as well, talking about, isn't this amazing that we've got a Queen consort who's putting her name to this and using her platform in this way? Yeah,
Cherie Blair also in it. Sir Patrick Stewart, the actor whose father abused his own mother and he as a child witnessed it. There are some really powerful voices in there. But what comes through loud and clear for me, and I think this is what the Queen wants to achieve, is that she's giving a voice to those survivors of domestic abuse, and you really hear their stories. It's not actually all about her. She's enabling them to be able to tell their
using
stories.
Her platform. But
using it so effectively,
it's balancing out when you're making a programme. You want to make it all about the member of the royal family who's taking part. But I think they've done a very clever weave between using Camilla's voice and using her as the guide, if you like, but actually, as you say, giving a voice to a number of women many women who are all fortunately survivors.
So this will air next week, and it sounds like, from what you've both said, it's a must-watch. So thank you for giving us your thoughts. Yeah. We'll move along now back to Robert Hardman's book, because there is something else in it that's generated a lot of attention recently, which is the news that the King reportedly recently finally cut Prince Andrew's alleged £1 million a year spending allowance. Now, a lot of people have been calling for this for some time. Do you think it goes far enough, though, or do you think that he should also evict him from Royal Lodge?
I think Andrew was always going to have a difficult time when there was a change of reign, because famously his mother, whether for favourite son or not, but I think as a parent you're much more forgiving of your children than a sibling is of another sibling. And that is kind of playing out in front of us now, isn't it? There's the King saying, look, you've been convicted of nothing in court, nothing's been proven in court, but reputationally you're damaged goods.